I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money, and this is Filmmakers On. Today, filmmaker Joe Bartone is back. He just finished production on his feature film Everything Will Be Fine in the End and is in the midst of editing it. This is a great conversation about the this is a great conversation about the good and the bad of making a first feature. I highly recommend checking this one out. Let's do the interview thing. So today I'm here with Joe Bartone, who just finished production on his first feature film as a director. Everything Will Be Fine in the End. How's it going today, Joe?
Well, I got crew flu, but luckily I got it the day after we wrapped. So, which was a gauntlet day. We had to do 17 setups.
Oh, wow.
On the last day, other than the pickup day. And that was an insane undertaking. One of the advantages, I think, to being the writer is you can rewrite the script while you're shooting when you run out of time. Mm-hmm. So I was able to get through 17 scenes in one day. That was nuts.
You know, you've directed a few short films up to this, but this was your first feature. What was the biggest surprise for you? What was the thing that you didn't quite expect that it was?
Well, there's kind of a litany. The film, I originally wrote a script that I could shoot for about $10,000, which was a joke. Figuring I could just steal all the scenes outside and then shoot it like, with one camera, but then it began to snowball. And I did this Indiegogo campaign and I raised probably like 20 grand on that. And then I had some other investors come in. Long story short, after bleeding every last penny I had, I think the budget came to 94,000 in production costs.
What was the intended budget?
The practical budget was 61 or 62, like around there, 60, I guess 64 maybe. So it was like 35% over budget.
Ouch.
And there's lots of surprises that happen from that. Like the contingency is a very funny word. Contingency is supposed to be the portion of the film for any surprise incidentals. But what happens when you shoot a lot of exteriors is there are a great many contingencies. For instance, the van that we rented for the camera gear, somebody ran into it in a parking lot. And now this was not a damage caused by the driver or my team. We just got back to the parking lot and there was a huge ass dent in the side of the car. That cost me $1,000. That's a contingency. Mm-hmm. The biggest one I think was a bee stung my lead actress who is highly allergic, and she went into anaphylactic shock and she had to stick herself with 2 EpiPens. And I have to say, for 30 minutes, my entire life crumbled like a Greek ruin. I can't even express to you what that feeling is. Luckily, she had insurance and it was really good insurance. So it didn't end up costing production anything. And she lived, which I probably should have put first.
I should have led with that.
She lived. She spent 2 days in the hospital.
Wow.
And I have to tell you that when you're the writer, the director, when you put in, I think I put in every last penny, which is around 60,000 of my own money.
Wow.
You see, I'm the executive producer, I'm the producer, so I'm responsible. Mm-hmm. And then this person who you've really come to love, I mean, because Elsa came out from Boston we started filming second week of November, but she came out last week of October, so we could, work and rehearse together. And, she's a young woman, she's 26, full of life and vitality. And we became very good friends, very close friends over the course of the production. So when you come back from a shoot and you pull up to base camp and then suddenly the bee stings, and the amount of crisis in my head, I don't think I've had a meltdown like that since my parents died.
Wow.
I was just wandering around the parking lot, unable to stop moving. I was having a breakdown because not only was her health certainly at risk, but my home, my film, everything could have simply ended with one bee sting. Now there's a contingency that a lot of, I thought I'd go home and I'd get divorced, right, I really did. It's like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to lose everything I own. And this poor woman is, very ill, possibly could die. And yeah, it's a crisis that I don't think too many filmmakers consider.
No.
How's that for a story?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
No, we almost got arrested on the subway because we're carrying a camera, and I saw the police and I said, you know what, they're not going to let us shoot here, so let's just sit next to the police so they know we're not filming. And then we'll just get off the train. And when we got off the train, they tried to arrest me anyway, which is kind of crazy because they saw we weren't filming, but they had convinced themselves that we had already filmed something. And so I had, and this, now, I mean, legally speaking, he would have lost the case. No, there's no problem because we not filmed anything. But the reality was at that moment is that he would have seized my camera and he would have seized my gear, which would have stopped the film.
Yeah.
So it was a Kobayashi Maru, if you're a Trek fan. It was a no-win situation. So I had to keep repeating, I made a mistake. I'm very sorry. Please let me go home, which is a very strange thing for a guy in his 50s to constantly say over and over and over again. And my DP, Jose Zambrana Casella, he's Venezuelan. All he said was, hey, we didn't film anything. And the cop went into a rage on him. I think possibly because he wasn't, because he spoke with an accent and he had a different color skin. It was very obvious to me that there was a racial undertone. You want to go to jail right now, buddy? I'll take it. And like, he was just very adamant, but I had to keep repeating that until finally they let us go. So that was another crazy thing. Anyway, I could tell you a million horror stories, but let's go on to the next question.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because in independent films, especially micro budget stuff, you're always on a razor's edge of it just all falling apart. Like, I think that's one thing filmmakers don't take into account. I mean, they think contingency, they think, oh yeah, if I get shut down this day, I'll do this or that, a little bit, but problems on micro budget films are exponentially tougher than they are on a studio film because
they're so critical.
Less money, less days. I mean, and just think about it on a schedule, level. If you have 10 days to shoot a film, one messed up day is 10% of that film.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, like 35%, that's a pretty high overage. What, if you were doing it over again, what would you do?
Well, that's a very good question. If I knew I was going to raise the $94,000 at the top of the film.
Well, let's just say that, how would you have not went over?
Right. Well, first of all, okay, but the big, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
We shot from 5:30 a.m. roughly to 5:30 p.m. That was the schedule. But we really only had 9.5 hours of sunlight, 10 hours of sunlight. So we were constantly racing the sun. If I had shot it in the summer, I would have had 2 more hours per day.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the stress would have gone much lower. The other problem too is, I'm a fairly good negotiator and I had an excellent unit production manager, but he wasn't as used to micro budget films as he was to larger stuff. He had done stuff for Paramount and Fox and everything. He was extremely talented and I absolutely would use him every time. But I was having to teach him how to negotiate rates for locations and things, since we spent a little bit more on locations in some instances than I would have liked. But the main thing, the big problem was typically what happens when you're directing the film that you're paying for, you have to trust the finances of somebody else and the scheduling, because you don't have time to focus on that part.
Right.
And other departments are making demands like, I know I said I could do this without this much help, but now I need this much help. And you have to come up with the money. And that happened, and every department would have that problem. And all their points were valid. So I think the biggest issue I had was, although I had 6 weeks of prep on this film, and it was extremely well prepped, unfortunately, other departments had done little or no prep.
Right.
And as a result, what happens when another department doesn't do any prep on a film until they just show up because they're getting a low rate and they just wanted to shoot this thing, or they had other contracts or conflicts. What happens in that case is that they've already changed your plan then, because they don't have one, and they are they're kind of playing it as they go, and you have to continually modify your plan to meet that scenario.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So I guess my question is like like knowing hindsight 2020, knowing everything that went down, do you think there is a way to better, because when you're dealing with the pay situation, if you're paying 200 a day or 150 a day, or whatever the rate is, you can't afford prep days. Like how do you prepare a department that you can't pay for prep? Or is there, or is there any way? It may
I would
be
have to think about that one.
Yeah, maybe
Here's a good example. There's several intimacy scenes in the film, or this, or I should say one fairly involved intimacy scene.
Okay.
And what I did to prep for that was I had my lead actress do the choreography in pre-production and then draw out all of the scenarios and really hit the points in the script, and then present that to the entire team and explain how we're going to do it, what parts we need. I had her work the whole thing out. And then I had the other talent write off on that. Then we went into rehearsals, and I spent an entire day with my very wonderful friend, Holly, who is also in this case, one of the hats she was actress, she was production designer, Holly Rockwell Pullman. She was also the intimacy coordinator. They rehearsed it. So in my mind, this was all done. But what happened was, on the day of filming, it was decided that because of my gender, that I should not be present for the film. And I had to look at it remotely, limitedly, and which is fine. It went great. But what happened was, a shot that should have taken me 45 minutes to film took 2.5 hours to film.
Right.
And not only do I feel that was hard on the actors, but it took it 90 minutes away from my shooting schedule.
Right. And you're not saying that, hey, it shouldn't have been like this. You're just saying that it should have been like that, but we should have
we can't really
it out a little further.
Right. We can't really always determine what the needs of other departments are going to be.
Right.
I believe me, I am not in any way saying that was done incorrectly. It was done perfectly.
Of course. It
was done perfectly. It's just a contingency. Yeah. Where my tight schedule did not allow for that flexibility, and then suddenly I found myself 90 minutes down on the shooting schedule.
Yeah. Do you think it would be fair to say that when you're prepping something that it has a director, you tend to pay a little more attention just because you know more about them, the departments that you've had experience in?
Well, I'm a
not you in general, but I just mean in like directors in general. Do you think that like, hey, I work as a director, so I worry about, I prep my department, my job really thoroughly, but maybe like I don't think so much about production design or whatever it is?
No, well, certainly working with Holly, we worked hand in hand. I guess I'm mostly talking about the camera department. That's a tough one, because they worked really, really hard. They worked really, really well. It's just that things take a lot longer than they had planned. Like the camera department said, oh, we can get a car rig up in 10 minutes. And 90 minutes later, they're still trying to figure out how to put it on.
Right.
And they said, well, we need more help to put it on. So I hired more people, and it still took 90 minutes.
Right.
So
and the budget's going up. Yeah.
And again, I'm not angry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I expect everything to go wrong. That's part of the plan. And if you think about it, like, because I knew my plan so well, this is the key point. Because I knew my plan so well, and because I expected so many things to go wrong, short of the ambulance taking a day of my filming away, I still managed to get all my shots done in the 15.5 days that I had planned for it.
Right.
Because I knew it was going to fall apart. And you have to have the project so well in your head that I could recuperate instantaneously. When we got to the junkyard, and we don't have enough lights to film it the way we exactly wanted to, and night is falling, I simply just reblocked it so that we could get the talent to a place where we could shoot them. Mm-hmm. And I do that on the fly. There's another scene where there's an entire scene where there's two talent talking in a car, and I didn't have enough time to shoot all of the shots that day. So I looked at that schedule and I said, well, something's got to go, but how do I fill this hole? And I said, 1970s style filmmaking. Okay, we're just going to have the car come down the road. You're going to film it coming down the road, and I'm going to have them record the audio separately as a voiceover. We're doing 1970s style filmmaking, where you see the car, you see them in the car, and you hear the audio, but you actually get to smash them together. And that saved us, you know, an hour on filming in that alone. And that's because as a director and a producer, you have to know your project that well that you're able to make those kinds of adjustments on the fly, and that are still creatively very viable and very exciting.
Right. So we've talked a lot about, you know, problems, and every production has their problems, but
Sure.
what went really well?
Well, what went really well? Everything went really well. First of all, Holly Rockwell Pullman, I just got to say, is a friggin' monster dynamo.
Yeah.
I can't really, I mean, honestly, I can't say enough good things about her. And she went really well. I think, okay, let's talk about this. What went really well? The first thing that went really well was choosing my locations. What went really well was I wanted to show Los Angeles. I wanted to show a side of Los Angeles that people hadn't seen. And I wanted to shoot in two major locations in downtown. One is called Rio Street area, and one is called Santee Alley. Now, if you're not familiar with the geography of Los Angeles, Rio Street is this warehouse industrial area just south of downtown, where all the buildings are covered in massive 60, 100-foot wall art. Every building, every place you turn are intricate, brilliant, incredibly complex street art. And at the same time, I mean, everywhere you turn, you can't turn, at the same time, it's filled with garbage. There's just trash everywhere. And over this entire area, they are rebuilding the 6th Street Bridge. Now, the 6th Street Bridge, of course, was the iconic bridge in Los Angeles that you see in all the Hollywood movies, and it finally fell into disrepair. And for a very brief, 5 or 6 years now, we have a major construction site going on there. If you've ever seen anyone build an expansion bridge, it's an incredible architectural triumph. So by choosing that as a location, the amount of production value I had went up exponentially, because it only cost me, $1,000 a day in permitting to film that, which is a lot of money. But what I got back was not only something absolutely unique and iconic, but also very momentary, because when they finish the bridge, all that's going away. All that massive construction's going away. And they light the construction at night. So you have these beams of light coming up from these steel poles and these girders and these huge arcs they're putting in place. So it was absolutely incredible. So that went particularly well. Shooting in the junkyard went particularly well. Again, when I write, I try to write for locations. What are interesting places where things happen? And I found this great car crushing junkyard up in the hills above Burbank. And it was $1,500 a day, but it was a good deal. And again, the way the sun came down over those crushed cars, that built in a lot of great production value. Santee Alley, which is in fact, should I stop here? I don't know if I'm going to too long. But
no, go ahead.
Santee Alley is an iconic Los Angeles district in the fashion district where the Latino culture has brought over with them. They have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shops, all lining all the alleys and all the ways, all the walkways. There's so many shops, and it's filled with like thousands of people that just walk up and down this area, and they sell everything from, vinyl boots and pink wigs to $200 suits. It's all this kind of fashion stuff that's really pop fashion, and you could film there all day long, and nobody seems to care. So again, we had massive production value by plotting out the locations. That went particularly well. But what went the most part that went well, the most important part that went well, and I pointed this out to Jose, who is my brother, and I love him. He did a phenomenal job for filming this, absolutely incredible. But the most important thing is when my cast got on to set, especially the rockers, they knew every line, every word, every time. In fact, it was when we did the car hit scene, we were so pressed for time. I brought in another director for that, who David Lee, who worked on Batman. My friend David Lee came in and he directed the hit portion of the car, which the guy gets hit by the car. But we were so pressed for time that we did not have time to block all the dialogue that came after the hit. And I remember very clearly filming that when the hit came, and my actors, my young rock and roll fucking loving, I love them so much, actors came out of the car and blocked it themselves, having never rehearsed it on location, and nailed it. And that is the advantage of pre-production, that when you're totally screwed on time, if you have them well rehearsed, if you have them off book, you just have to document what's going on. Mm-hmm. That saved my ass. That saved probably an hour of filming right there. And as you know, Jason, like it's like what, $3,000 a minute, it seems, or whatever, the $500 a minute, it's $3,000 an hour. I don't know what it is. There's a lot of money in that. And you just constantly, you never have enough hours, especially when you're racing against the sun. So that went really well.
Yeah, you had talked the last time we spoke, you talked about building in rehearsals and the importance of that with the actors. And I think that really speaks to what you're just saying now. Like, yeah. and I think we said it then too, there's just, so many independent productions, that is the thing that gets cut almost every time. Like they won't spend, a day of salary on the actors to get rehearsals when it will save them more than that on the back end. Yeah.
We had 3 days of rehearsals. I wish we had a week, if you ask me. And yeah. We also filmed the rehearsals too, which is important. Even if it was we just had a simple camera just to document the filming, because I wanted them to understand, they could go back and watch if they choose to or not. But more importantly, I wanted them to get used to the idea of being filmed, because I like to work with rock musicians. In fact, Cheska Zaid, Elsa Kennedy, and Stephen Michael Martin, they're all primarily rock musicians first. And Elsa had never been in a movie. She had just been in background actor. She had never acted in front of a camera before. But I have a strong affinity to rock musicians, because I think singer-songwriters are some of the best actors and actresses that I can possibly get. And they also, the other thing too, which is really important, I think, to note, why people ask me, why do I always film I mean, I do have, some great SAG actors. Ken Harper was in there, and John Mancuda from Lost was in there. And there was some really amazing, and also there were some amazing SAG actors that had come along too. But the reason why I like rock and roll actors is because in a limited fund film, in a micro budget film, it is grueling and it's a shit show. In fact, when they first got together in pre-production, I said, no matter what I do here, no matter how much we prep, no matter how much you think I got things in control, I will tell you, this will be a shit show. It will be a shit show. It's going to be stressful. We're going to scream at each other. We're going to cry. We're going to be exhausted. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. And I love rock musicians because they understand what that means. Because rock musicians know what it means to drag 500 pounds of gear to a gig and then get up and perform your hot set and then grab all that gear and shove it back in the van and drive 4 hours, all for $75. I mean, and do it day in and day out. And they understand the stresses of a production. Whereas I think a lot of SAG actors, who I love, and not all of them, but a lot of them, they cannot deal with the sheer volume of stress that goes into making a micro budget film.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably another problem that filmmakers get into on these movies is they try to have this studio mindset. It's going to be awesome and it's going to be great. And it's good to have a level of optimism. You have to.
Yeah, I want that.
Yeah. But you have to be realistic about what it's going to be like as well and let them know. Because I think that's where things really fall apart for people is when they set a false expectation. And it's not always consciously. Like, I mean, I've done it, 100 times. I'll, direct a movie and I come in and I'm all like, oh, this is going to be great. Don't worry. This will be no problem. And then it is. And
I think one reason why also because you, like me, are a producer, writer, director. So this very well firsthand is that in pre-production, you build these bonds with your talent and you're warm to them and you're kind to them and you're loving and they're loving you. And you have this thing of going into this thing. But once you get behind the monitor as a director, not for any reason other than time, you are no longer as emotionally available as you were in pre-production. Now suddenly they look at you like, well, you give them a hug and you reassure them, but your mind is so focused on what's going on for the job that when they're having a crisis, you can't always stop and run and intervene with that. You have to literally send someone, could you please go check on so-and-so, because you're still filming. And I remember very succinctly, I remember watching that happen where I had to run the camera crew and the grip crew and costuming. Is it the right wardrobe? And is this the right, production design? And I'm all this going on and dealing with these other, emotional things going on. And all I could do by day 10 was not react because I was so exhausted. I was so tired that it was just all I could do just to keep from breaking. And, and I did not have the emotional bandwidth after day 10. I wish I did, to deal with all these things in a loving way that I normally would. I was out of it. I was beyond exhausted. I was exhausted by day 10. By day 15, I had entered another level where I could just go and go and go like I was an automaton. And I remember the very last shot on day 15, when I finally realized we had finished the book. The first thing I did was I got out from behind the monitor and I walked outside and I screamed, "Fuck," as loud as I could 4 times in a row. And then I burst into tears. And I realized that was all the stress of 60 days nonstop, all the pre-production and the production, 60 days every day for 12 hours. And I finally had a chance to let it go because I was forcing it down so I could make my day. And then I cried again. And then someone said, speech. And I realized I was so drained. I had nothing to say except that's a wrap. That's all I could say. And I know you can relate to this.
I can totally relate to that. Yeah. And I think a lot of people watching this will relate to that. That's yeah, totally, man. I got a little emotional.
Recovering, you know?
Yeah. So when you're in the midst of that storm, you know, and it's crazy and everybody's coming at you, like, how do you maintain the, you know, your vision and the quality of what you're doing? Like, how do you not slip into half-assing something?
That's a really good point, because I will have to say there are times on a set, there are 3 times on a set that you have to give over control of your film. One is when you're doing car work, because there's probably not enough room for you in the car. Okay, so now your DP is directing, right? 2 is in an intimacy scene where there is excessive nudity, because now your intimacy coordinator is directing. And 3 is in a stunt, because now your stunt coordinator is directing. And those are the most difficult times for a director, is to let go of those issues. And you're just going to have to trust your team in those situations. Could you repeat the question again? I wonder.
So yeah. The question was like when everything's going crazy, how do you keep
all right, there we go,
creating a thing of quality without half-assing?
Outside those 3 instances, I have control of the set. That's a big chunk of the film.
Yeah.
There are times when people start making suggestions, and they need to make suggestions. Your department heads suggestions, we could try this, we should try this, we should try this. And they'll give you, for instance, it's like, well, we can't do that because we don't have a stunt coordinator here. We can't do that because she'd possibly get hurt. And at some point, I had to just say, I'm directing this, and my talent wants to do this, and this is how it's going to be. And it's I know at some point when I'm getting all this information, that if I don't have it on camera, I may as well cut it. I mentioned at one point, I said, well, if we don't do it this way, we should just cut the scene, because the way that you're presenting it to me, it's not going to work anyway. I mean, because ultimately, that's the point of the vision. Does it happen, you know, where what you're up against, and at that point, I said, so we're going to film it this way, and we're going to take our time. We're going to be careful, but we're going to film it this way. And this in the case was a talent being dragged across the floor by her arm. You would, you know, I'm not exactly sure why that caused an issue, but it did. And so I finally said that. But the other thing too, which is interesting about this, Jason, is Jose at one point asked me, how do you see this film, this particular scene? And I said to him, well, in my dream, I saw it like this. And he said, well, then that's what we're going to film. So at some point, when you're up against the wall and you don't know exactly how you're going to block something or what you're going to see, you have to trust your inner child. How does your inner child see it? How did he see it? Oh, and here's a really interesting thing I really wanted to say. When Jose and I first worked on the script in this film, you know, and I was coming up with these ideas, and he said to me, what is this going to be, like some kind of like crazy student film, like some kind of wacky student film? And I turned to him and I said, what the fuck's wrong with that? It's young people that make the best goddamn ideas. Why are we even trying to compete with other stuff? This is our one shot at making a movie, right? Let's be as innovative and crazy as possible. And if it fails on its own merits. But we need to keep to our passion, and we need to know what our dream is. And when we're stuck in those situations, we have to go with our child inside here, because in the end, that's all that matters. In the end, that's all we can really ultimately do. The minute we try to start making something as good as something else, we have failed. Oh, this is kind of like this horror movie, this is kind of like this Christmas film, and I want to make it like this Christmas film here. Obviously, I do use bits and pieces of movies, and I'm not saying that, but I never, ever compared what I was doing to what David Lynch was doing or what Gus Van Sant was doing, or because I can't compete with those guys.
Right.
But you know what? They can't compete with me. And as long as I stick to my dream, what is the thing that we love about Eraserhead? When we all saw Eraserhead for the first time, David Lynch film, because nobody had seen anything like it. And only a young mind could have seen that. What would have happened if David Lynch said, oh, I want to make a movie like a superhero film? We would never have Eraserhead or all the great movies that came from that. Terry Gilliam the same way, exactly. So my favorite directors are ones that are fearless in just attacking their inner child and bringing it out on film. And that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's a damn good point regardless. And I hope it's a meme one day.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'll cut this little section as its own thing later. Although I love the answer, but it's not quite what I was asking.
Could you give me an example?
Yeah. So you want to make a movie that's of a certain level of quality and that you're happy with, and you get there and it's hour 8 and it's not going well and everybody's freaking tired, and you just did this take and in your head that this take is not good enough, whether it's the performance or the camera move or whatever, that this take isn't quite good enough, but it's okay. So where do you draw the line on, just moving forward? How do you maintain quality under all that stress?
Yeah, okay. On a micro budget film, I don't know if you even have that luxury, Jason, honestly.
Yeah. Good answer.
I just have to tell you, I don't know if you have that. If it's out of focus, you can get another shot maybe. Again, I have to just, if here's
take your shot and trust it.
Well, here's a good point. This is actually giving me a good idea. Where do you put your time? You have a scene, right? And in this particular scene, Mank, we open up with Mank at his on his porch at his house, and he's transforming himself into a transgender lucha libre, and he's got he's putting on makeup for the first time, and he's looking in the mirror, and he's putting on his boxing robe with the feathers, and then after this part of the opening of the scene, there's a long dialogue section, which is fairly complex, involving 3 characters. Now, where do you put your time? Do you put your time on the dialogue part, or do you put your time on this front? I would always choose to put my time on the front, which was going to surprise people. I took a lot of time filming him in the mirror, filming his reaction. I had camera on just him alone, just looking at me. Because in my film, the characters are more important and than what they do or say. And in order to truly understand what was going to happen in the dialogue scene to follow, we had to really understand who this person Mank was in the scene. So my director choice then was to spend more time looking at my character, if I had to put time anywhere. Now, do they have to know the dialogue? Yes. And again, because they're rehearsed, they're all off book. So I never had a problem of them doing it. Did it mean I had to cut in on little bits of dialogue to get inserts and get little pieces, and where I would have preferred to run the whole dialogue scene? Absolutely. But we got all the coverage we needed. It was tricky for them because they have to come in at line 115 or line 42 or whatever to make this particular cut. We literally had to edit because we didn't have time to do the whole thing. But as a director, I knew the most important part, what was the point of the scene? And this gets back to your answer. So when you're looking at a scene, you have to ask yourself, what is it I'm truly trying to say here? That is where you put your focus.
Right.
If you have to make a choice, and God, one day let's all hope we never have to make a choice. But if you have to make a choice, you have to put the time in on what is the point of the scene. And then the rest of the time goes to whatever else is left. And that may even be a bigger chunk, but it's less important than the intention of the scene.
But, you know, upon completion of this, are you ready to do another one? How long?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
financial considerations aside,
Oh,
like, would you?
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that was the beautiful thing about this film was I decided to shoot this film because they wouldn't let me shoot my other scripts, although they won awards. One of them got me into the WGA, which is completely surprising because I wrote it in 7 days, but that's another story altogether. But yeah, they wouldn't let me shoot those movies because I've never made a movie. So I said, well, fine, fuck you, I'll go make a movie. And as a director. And so the entire intention was to do that. And the thing is, once you have made an indie film with a decent script that was fairly well acted and fairly well shot, once you've done that, you know, now these doors will be opening to you, and I believe this, that were not there before. So I never intended this movie to be a financial success. I intended this movie to be as honest and as real and as personal to me. And I would tell people on the set, look, we're making this movie for 3 fucking people. That's it. I'm making this entire movie so that 3 people can enjoy watching it. And if more than 3 watch it, that's fantastic. But I could care less if any more than that. And I know it's $90,000 and I'm going to be fucking paying for it forever, but I don't care, because the minute I try to make this movie for anyone but me and those 3 other people, I'm lost. But once I can make this movie and show them I can make a movie, now I'm open to do anything. And I've met so many people that never, ever would make a feature film because they think they don't have enough money. These are film people now. I'm talking about sound mixers, camera guys, all these people. They'll never make a movie because they don't have enough money and this, and they don't want to take the risk. And I'm saying, then what the hell did you go to school for?
Right.
Where did that fire go? Why did you go to film school if that's not what you wanted to do?
Yeah,
and I'm challenging them.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, it doesn't matter if it comes out great or not. What matters is that you've run the gauntlet. You know what it feels like to shoot of course, Jason, you know what it feels like to shoot your first feature. It feels like I've come down the other side of Mount Everest.
Keep a lookout for Everything Will Be Fine in the End, and check out Joe's YouTube channel, Small Factory Films. He's made some damn fine short films. But whatever you do, keep making movies.